Don't expect this week to be the week that Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears open up their passing game. You'll see why as we put together our game plan for the Bears to beat the New York Giants on Sunday.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. This episode is brought to you by BriteCo Jewelry and Watch Insurance. BriteCo brings you comprehensive, fast, and affordable jewelry insurance for as low as $5 a month. Check out your special offer for Locked On listeners and get covered in under 2 minutes at brite.co/locked on. That's brite.co/locked on. On the show today, we put together a game plan for how the Chicago Bears can advance to 3-1 and beat the New York Football Giants. We'll start with this Bears offense and why the running game will likely be key once again, not only because it's where the strength of the Bears offense is, but it's also where I think the Giants defense will be particularly vulnerable and will play itself into the Bears offensive strengths this week. Then we'll turn our attention to the Bears defense against this Giants offense and why I think the Giants are going to be going for something pretty similar and why the Bears should then try and make Daniel Jones and this depleted Giants wide receiver core beat them through the air. We'll wrap up looking at some of the key one-on-one matchups on both sides of the ball that I really think are going to go a long way towards deciding who wins this game. We've been waiting every week now for this Bears offense and Justin Fields to really click and get things going in the passing game. The production hasn't been there for the quarterback. It hasn't been there for the number one receiver. It hasn't been there for the number one tight end. Across the board, the Bears have not passed the ball well. And this week is another week where they need to lean into their running game. And we're going to have to hear another one of these weeks of, do the Bears trust Justin Fields? Do the Bears not trust their passing game? X, Y, or Z. I mean, we have to sort of put that aside and recognize that that's all external and that the important thing is that the Chicago Bears are winning football games. And yes, the important thing is developing Justin Fields, and the important thing is seeing his progress over time. That's sort of a separate conversation in the sense that this Bears team has showed us, and they have said repeatedly that winning is priority number one, and that Fields' development happens to come second to that. And so the purpose of this podcast today is putting together the game plan to win, not the game plan to develop Justin Fields as best as possible. I would argue it's more important to develop Justin Fields, but that's not the reality we're playing in right now. So we're not going to get too bogged down on it. But what we are going to get bogged down in is the Giants giving up 5.3 yards per carry this season. I think it's the third or fourth worst rush defense in terms of yards per carry in the NFL. And it's not an overall, certainly it's a struggling linebacker crew, and we'll get into them a little bit in the matchup section, but they've just not been very consistent in the ground game. And we've seen other teams, especially last week, the Dallas Cowboys in prime time on Monday Night Football. You saw Tony Pollard have a big game in that one, and they even got Zeke Elliott. I mean, they got both running backs going. Their whole offense had 176 yards on the ground. I want to say the split was over 100 for Pollard, and Zeke had 75 or so in that game. And they just had a two-headed monster back there, and it helped Cooper Rush get another win as a backup quarterback that has no business winning football games, at this kind of a clip so far early in his career, but he just took care of the football and didn't have to do anything crazy or miraculous for them because they could rely on the running game. Same approach for Justin Fields. You look 2 weeks ago, the Carolina Panthers, Christian McCaffrey, 102 yards on 15 carries, made life easier on Baker Mayfield. And obviously the Panthers didn't win that game, but some of that comes down to the defense. And of course, the Bears offense isn't going to just single-handedly win this game. But the point being, the Giants have struggled to stop the run, and the Bears have one of the best rushing attacks in football. And Khalil Herbert looked like one of the best running backs in football last week in a small sample size. He's not one of the best running backs in football just yet, but he has that type of explosive ability that can take over football games. This Bears offensive line has been run blocking particularly well. The fullback has been blocking well. The wide receivers have been blocking well. The tight ends have been on the field on those plays, also there, existing, breathing, taking up snaps. Sure, they're physically around and technically involved in the football play, but it's been a clear strength of this Bears offense, and lean into your strengths. You don't have to force don't force the passing game unless you have to, right? If you're down 14 in the third or fourth quarter, you got to pass the ball, right? There are times when you need to, but you don't have to pass the ball if you don't need to pass the ball. If your running game is getting you 5, 6, 7 yards per carry, and you're close, if not winning, on the scoreboard, and your defense is slowing down the opponent and sometimes giving you some turnovers in there to give you extra offensive possessions, you don't have to pass the ball. Don't worry if you're the Bears. Don't worry about his passing stats, right? It's annoying for us on the outside, people who play fantasy football, people who want to measure Justin Fields and this Bears passing game. It's kind of annoying and easy to poke fun at when the passing attempts are 11 and the passing yards are under 100 yards, and it's just not on the same pace as other NFL offenses. But they're 2-1, and they can get to 3-1 offensively by running the ball and relying on Khalil Herbert, and also using Justin Fields' legs in the ground game, the read options, the RPOs, scrambling on rollouts and design quarterback runs. I mean, a lot of different things you can do. You should be able to run the ball on this Giants team. That should make it easier when you do need to pass, but ideally, you don't have to pass all that much. And we have to get over that idea that, yes, it's a passing league. And yes, passing is more efficient, and there's plenty of reasons why you would rather have a good passing game than a good running game. But if you are winning games by running the ball effectively, you can continue to do so until it stops working to win football games. And that's kind of, at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. And I think this Giants team presents an opponent that you can win the football game by effectively running the ball for 4 quarters, which is what the Bears are able to, or have shown a proclivity to be able to do so far this season. This style of run-first football relies on your defense to hold up quite a bit of that bargain. The Bears defense has been able to hold up its end fairly consistently throughout the season so far, and we'll go through what they need to do against the New York Giants, who will likely be taking a similar approach next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at BriteCo, your custom jewelry insurance partners, because they're here to protect you in case of anything going wrong with your jewelry. You ever see those viral videos of somebody staging a big proposal somewhere outside nice, and maybe they drop the ring and it falls off a cliff, or it falls in between the cracks somewhere, or it falls into the ocean, or buried in the sand, or wherever it might be. The ring is lost, the moment is ruined, and all that cash, all that money you spent on that ring is out the window. Don't let that happen to you. You don't have to be proposing. You don't have to be down on one knee. You just have to have jewelry that you value, and our friends at BriteCo provide the jewelry insurance that makes sure you have a replacement for the full value of that ring, that watch, that necklace, that earring, whatever it might be. No matter if it's lost, stolen, or you just can't figure out what happened to it, BriteCo is here to keep you covered. Go to brite.co/locked on. It's the fastest, easiest, and cheapest way to cover yourself with the best jewelry insurance in the business. That's brite.co/locked on. The Chicago Bears are going to need their defense to cover them a little bit in this game, as has been the formula for a lot of this season. That includes getting a turnover or two to give your offense that extra possession, to give you the time to be able to just control the clock with the ground game, not need to pass, not need to be behind on the scoreboard and score points quickly, but control the clock and really feel like you are setting the tone and in control for these games. And the Giants are going to be looking to do something similar, because the Giants already were, I think, a little limited in the passing game, just given what we know up to this point about Daniel Jones. I mean, Brian Daboll is a good head coach and a good offensive schemer, and he's gotten Daniel Jones to play about as good as you can get Daniel Jones to play, but there's still some real limitations in that. And it gets even further limited when Your number one wide receiver, Sterling Shepard, is out for the season. Now got injured last week and will be donezo with, I think it was an ACL tear, if I remember correctly. And your first round pick from last year, Kadarius Toney, misses both days of practice this week and so far, and likely not going to play on Sunday. So your leading receiver in this game will be Richie James, who you may or may not have heard of. He was a seventh-round pick in 2018. I remember him coming out of the draft out of Middle Tennessee, small school kid who played really well at the Senior Bowl. And I do think Richie James is legit. Like, he's not a number one wide receiver, but he's good. He's got talent, and I do have a lot of respect for Richie James. They got Kenny Golladay, who we all thought was going to be very good, but has just been a complete bust with the New York Giants, and that's about it for receivers that you may have heard of. And so, all of that being said, load up the box, stop the run, make Daniel Jones, and more specifically those wide receivers, beat you. Because Saquon Barkley's having a bounce-back season. He's averaging 6 yards a carry. He's got 300 yards on over 50 carries so far, averaging 105 yards a game. He has been the workhorse once again for them, and they're up there with the Bears as far as one of the best rushing teams in football. They average the second highest yards per attempt and the fourth most rushing yards this season. Now, they're at the bottom of the league in passing, just like the Chicago Bears, so they're going to want to do the same things I was talking about in the first segment. Run the ball. Don't make your quarterback have to throw the ball. Rely on Barkley to really carry that load for you because he's been individually very good. Their offensive line has been better run blocking than in pass protection. I'm not sold that they're an incredible, amazing run blocking unit and offensive line as a whole. I think they've played some teams in Titans, Panthers, and to a lesser extent the Cowboys that have some vulnerability in that area to be able to run on. Not to say that they don't have a good running game, but just I wonder how much is Barkley, how much is the offensive line, and what that split is. I tend to give Barkley a little bit more of the credit in that case, whereas I think the Bears have had some really good run blocking on their offensive line, and their running backs have been pretty good at creating some extra yards for themselves after contact. So they're going to hand the ball off to Barkley quite a bit. They're going to try and avoid throwing with Daniel Jones, probably not to the extent that the Bears have avoided throwing the football. They'll pass a little bit more, and you do have to be ready for it, but it's going to be the Barkley show for them in particular. And Daniel Jones has been pretty good scrambling with the ball himself. He's had some not only some RPO stuff and some read option, but also just taking off on passing plays like Justin Fields. So you do have to keep an eye on a mobile quarterback, but the ground game is going to be their bread and butter. And I have to imagine, given all the injuries that they have at wide receiver, they're probably going to try and load up a little bit more with extra tight ends and backs if they can. I mean, they're only a 3 tight end team, and they got 3 running backs on the roster, but they're not going to spread you out 4 wide receivers and run the ball all that much. I don't anticipate they want to have that many wide receivers on the field. Not that it's going to be all loaded up all the time, but I wonder if you're the Bears and you're trying to counter a team that wants to run the ball more, you're just going to be in your base defense more often in general, that your third linebacker on the field to stop the run as opposed to your 5th defensive back. So I think this game is going to put a lot of onus on what will probably be Joe Thomas, the Bears' third linebacker, because Matthew Adams is normally the third linebacker, but he got hurt last week, or was it leading into last week? And he's looking not great on the injury report this week as well. So it'll be Roquan, Nick Morrow, and Joe Thomas as your number 3 running back. And so I think there's going to be some onus on him to help out in run defense and really be a difference maker up front, because it felt to me like Matthew Adams had been maybe the best of the 3 in terms of run defense the first couple of games until Roquan really turned things on quite a bit again last week and looked more like himself. And that's why I'm feeling a little bit more confident about the Bears being able to stop the run, because the Packers and 49ers kind of had their way with it. But last week, Roquan really clicked in against the Houston Texans. And I would assume then that this run defense as a whole is getting more and more comfortable in this Matt Eberflus defense, and that we should then see the results of that I don't think you're going to shut down Saquon Barkley at this point. I mean, we know the kind of talent Barkley has, and we've seen how good he has been in the past, and we're seeing it again this season, despite a little bit of a lull in there for a couple of seasons. Some injuries in there were a factor in that as well. But if you could just keep him from like totally beating you, right? You want to make Daniel Jones have to be the one that beats you. Make them need to throw the ball late in the game without the option to run. And you saw last week against the Cowboys on Monday Night Football, it was a game-sealing interception for that Dallas Cowboys defense, and it feels like the Bears defense is built that same kind of way, where because the Bears are going to be running the ball, and it's not going to be a shootout type game. The Bears are not going to run up the score and then be comfortable throughout the fourth quarter. I think you're going to see Giants with the football and a chance to drive to tie the game, down 6 or 7 or 10 or whatever it might be in the fourth quarter, or maybe even 3, right? And Daniel Jones driving, 2 minutes left, needs to throw the ball, and it's Eddie Jackson or Jaquan Brisker or Jalen Johnson probably not going to play, but it's one of these Bears DBs stepping in front of a pass, generating the interception, and ending the game on that game-sealing turnover. That's what kind of matchup this game feels like, and it's probably going to be a low-scoring one as a result. I think it's going to come down to how well that front for the Bears can keep that Giants offensive line from setting the line of scrimmage, and of course, reversely, how the Bears can get their line of scrimmage moving a little bit more. A couple of tough matchups up front for them that we'll get into as we'll go through all the key matchups on both sides of the ball that I think are going to be most pivotal to this game next on Locked On Bears. On yesterday's podcast with Patricia Traina, it was Crossover Thursday. We talked to the host of Locked On Giants and got a little bit of that sort of inside scoop from one of our local experts on the Locked On Podcast Network about their team. So if you want more Giants stuff, go take a look at that. We talked about some of the matchups in that game, looking at like Darnell Mooney going against some of the younger defensive backs in this Giants secondary. But one of the matchups that really stand out to me that we didn't get into much yesterday is the struggles of this Giants linebacking core. And for me, this is a little bit less purely a one-on-one matchup and more about an area of the field matchup, because like you could say, okay, linebacker Tay Crowder versus say like Cole Kmet. Sure, it's not always going to be those two one-on-one in coverage, but they're still figuring out who their other linebacker is going to be. It was Austin Calitro. Then last week, they started Calitro and then rotated in their rookie 5th-round pick, Micah McFadden. Either way, especially in the passing game, when you do have to pass or when you do opt to pass, I'm going after those linebackers, and I want to attack that middle of the field area of this Colts defense. I do like their safeties, and I think they have some real talent there, but that sort of like short to intermediate area, make those linebackers cover, especially if you can get wide receivers on short, intermediate, deep crossing routes, any sort of in-breaking route over the middle of the field, because I also think it's a easier, and it's not an easier read for Justin Fields, but it is one that when he's had trouble trusting what he's seeing and fully processing the play, I think the middle of the field gives you more time to see it. When you're throwing to the outside, right, you really have to kind of hit the receiver right when he goes outside, or else he gets to the sideline and the receiver's out of room to run. So then if you don't hit him right away, that route is done for. But when you have guys working over the middle of the field, whether it's a corner in route, like a straight 90-degree in route, or an actual crossing route, all along their route, they have the entire middle of the field to work across. So if you don't hit them at the beginning of their break, you can still sort of see them through the route and have a second chance to maybe hit that same route, depending on what the coverage is, or there's more time to hit that route. And especially when you have linebackers that are going to be pretty vulnerable in coverage based on what we've seen the first 3 games, I am attacking that area of the field, and specifically the likes of Tay Crowder and Austin Calitro, or maybe the rookie Micah McFadden, if he ends up, I don't know if he's going to get the start. I don't know what the situation there is with that linebacker rotation they trotted out last week. The other one on the Bears offense that I don't know if concerned about is the right word, but I certainly have my eye on is Larry Borom at right tackle going up against the defensive end, Oshane Ximines. I think it's Ximines. Oshane Ximines, the defensive end for the New York Giants. He's been kind of their top dog up front. It's been a nice mixture with him and Azeez Ojulari, and then Kayvon Thibodeau is rotating in there. They got Jihad Ward on the outside. They've got a pretty deep group up front, but I think Ximines has kind of been the most consistent in the ground game and in terms of like generating pressure. I don't think he's gotten much in terms of the sack department. As a defense, they only have 3 sacks on the season. He has 1 of them, but it hasn't been like a big-time sack the quarterback. But he has gotten pressure fairly consistently, and it's going to be a lot of him versus Larry Borom on that outside, whether you're trying to run the outside zone runs to that side or whether Justin Fields is rolling to that right side or where the pressure is going to come. I have an eye on that right tackle spot, given the tight end help over there. You can't ignore the left side, of course, with Braxton Jones, but curious to see how Larry Borom's able to match up here in what will be a bigger test for him. Flipping over to the Giants' offensive line, their strength on the offensive line is Andrew Thomas, their left tackle. He's really the blue chip of the group, and that's the side Robert Quinn lines up on the majority of the time. And so it's really like their best offensive lineman versus the Bears' best defensive lineman, and I'm curious to see who's going to win that matchup more often than not, right? It's never 100%. It's always sometimes Quinn's going to get the best of him. Sometimes Andrew Thomas is going to get the best of Quinn. But how that ends up shaking out over the course of the game will be very interesting to watch. We've seen the stats now from I think it's ESPN's analytics. One of the analytics. Robert Quinn is one of the most double-teamed pass rushers in the NFL this season, like top 5 in the highest rate of double teams on his pass rushing snaps. But when you got a left tackle like Andrew Thomas, I wonder if it'll be more one-on-ones in this matchup. And it's like, all right, beat him. Go get that pressure on Daniel Jones when they have to throw, set that edge in the running game. It's going to be one of the bigger tests that Robert Quinn has faced this season, and I'm curious to see how he's able to do in some of those one-on-one matchups. I know the game plan is to make the Giants beat you with the passing game because the passing game is not their strength. But I am curious how the Richie James matchup goes in the slot with Kyler Gordon. And we mentioned Richie being kind of the one productive Giants receiver that's healthy entering this game. He's like the majority of the time in the slot. He's like 5'9". I don't know exactly how many pounds they list him at, but it can't be. I think he's listed at like 185, but that might be generous. He's a small, fast, explosive slot wide receiver. And we've seen at times Kyler Gordon struggle this season. He's had some bounce back moments as well. And I think this will be another interesting test for him against maybe a different size and style of wide receiver, somebody who's just quick, fast, and explosive. But how well will Daniel Jones be able to put him on it accurately and with good timing? Will Gordon just be able to run with him really well? Like, I don't think Richie James is at this stage of his career like an elite downfield route runner. He's just fast and explosive. So I'm curious to see how that matchup goes with Kyler Gordon. If they're having James work across the middle of the field and Gordon is trailing in coverage, can he keep up consistently? Can he kind of, because especially with Jalen Johnson out, step up a little bit. You're the second round pick. You're the rookie in the big spot in the slot. Can you lock down the one receiver on their team that has been productive this season? I have a feeling the Bears will be okay this year. I mean, let's get it clear about Richie James, right? His season high is 59 yards on 5 catches. So he's not a 100-yard receiver type guy. It's just that's the bar right now for this New York Giants passing game with Sterling Shepard out for the season. So curious to see how Kyler Gordon does again, where we'll see if the Giants particularly say, okay, here's our best receiver. Here's the rookie cornerback who's gotten burned a few times this season. Maybe let's try and attack him. I'm curious how intentional that might be from Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka, the Giants offense, because we've seen them have a history of making effective offenses and making quarterbacks play better than they have in their past. So you don't want to put anything past them, but I'm not overly worried just yet about that bad wide receiving core and what we kind of know Daniel Jones is at this stage of his career. That's why in the Crossover Thursday podcast yesterday, I predicted a win, a low-scoring win, a close win, but the Giants are like 3.5-point favorites on BetOnline right now, so a lot of that's the home field advantage, but still, a Bears win straight up on that money line could be some good bet for you as well, no matter where you participate if sports betting is legal in your state or if you find other ways to do it as well. I think I like the Bears' chances in this one, and I couldn't say that against the 49ers or the Packers. I felt better about it against the Texans, and despite the Giants being 2-1 and not being terrible, I just think they're a lot closer to the Bears level than everyone is necessarily giving them credit for, and we'll see how that plays out on Sunday. Again, low scoring, defense, running game, turnover or two, try and shut down Saquon Barkley as best you can, make Daniel Jones beat you, and I think you'll be off to another Chicago Bears victory. Whatever happens in the game on Sunday, you can be sure we'll break it all down for you Monday morning right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today. Hopefully, your first listen every single day. Now that we're wrapping up, if you're looking for your second listen, go check out Locked On Giants with Patricia Traina to get all the latest on the Bears' opponent this week. Our local experts are your team every day, and that includes their team every day. And that's what Patricia's here for you, to better get to know these New York Football Giants. Come on back for Monday for that post-game breakdown and your next opportunity to bear down.